I wanted to talk about how GCSE students can learn fast. And what made me think about this is I have been working with several students lately. Many of them started with me over the last several weeks. And what I've noticed is just that gap in the learning, which I'm sure many of them, there's no point in going on and on about that. And so what from that's made me thought about, okay, we need to help the students make sure that they are picking up things and learning quite fast. I was listening to something, I came across something recently that was talking about summer backslide. And that's the idea that, or actually research that every summer students lose 1 month of learning, right? And so if we take into account with the students this year, you're really talking about the many students, the vast majority of students have lost about a year, more or less, of learning, right? And so that way that students normally learn, which is maybe slow, it's old-fashioned, it's outdated, they need to change that, right? And they need to develop different skills, different techniques. They need to be so much more strategic in their learning so that they can really get up to scratch quite quickly and be ahead of the game by the time next year starts, whether it's year 9 students, year 10 students, or year 11 students. Okay, so I'm going to jump right in and I'm just going to do a quick share on how GCSE students can learn fast. Okay, so what we're going to do, I've noticed some key mistakes, and I'm going to focus on 3 of these key mistakes that students do. And then we're going to look at what they should be doing instead. Yeah, so the mistakes students are making and what they really should be doing instead in order to learn fast. The first one is memorizing. Okay, now the reason for some of these mistakes like memorizing is just that curriculum, that content is overwhelming, it's massive. Especially if you think of science as not one subject, it's 3 separate disciplines, right? And because it's massive, they don't know where to start, they don't know what to do. And the reality is actually when it comes to learning and revising, many students don't know, many students haven't been taught. Schools are very good at dishing out the curriculum, but they're not so good at the strategic things behind how to help students with this, right? And so because students don't know, they default to things like memorizing. Now, what is the problem with memorizing? The problem with memorizing is that the brain can only remember so much, right? It's going to forget, right? There's only so much that if you think about it when you're busy, let's say you're a parent, you're busy, you've got to pick the kids up from school, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. You have to now start making notes and writing things down. I know for me, I'm so busy these days, if I don't write things down, I completely forget. That's what students try to do. They just try to memorize, they just chunk things in the head. And so they're going to forget. And the brain will remember, but yes, it's only going to remember for a certain time. And what this leads to is the student feeling inadequate and thinking, hang on a minute, I'm spending so much time revising, focusing at school, learning at home, doing all of these things, but I seem to forget. I just don't remember, and it just seems like I'm not learning, and that makes the child disheartened. So memorizing is just not it's just not a good way to go. When I was at school 20 years ago, I memorized. It was what I knew then, to be honest. And memorization was enough then to get you a pass, right? Now it isn't enough. Now the curriculum is so much bigger. Many GCSEs now, maths, sciences, and many schools starts from year 9. So memorization is just not enough. There are several years ago saying chemistry, you would have information sheets on certain formulas and different things like that. Now you don't have it, right? You need to know it. And so memorization isn't actually going to help you with that. So in a minute, I'm going to come back at the end of this to talk to you about what they should be doing instead. But right now, I'm actually going to jump into the second mistake that students make, and that is making excessive notes. So why do students make excessive notes? They make excessive notes because they don't know any other way. Like I say, nobody has taught them at school or anywhere else how to revise, how to study, how to make notes. In fact, yeah, how to make notes. And I think that's something I can do for another training, as I'm talking to you about that, is do a training on how to make notes. So yeah, no one's actually spoke to them about how to make notes. And so they just write down excessive, long-winded notes. So here's an example of something. So this is definition for diffusion. A bit of a long definition, but it has all the key things that you need to know about diffusion. Now, if you have that definition, if you know that definition inside out, that's good. That's good enough to get you like a grade C. And what's that these days? A grade 4, okay? The problem with this, what students do is they would write down that definition word for word, right? So as a class teacher, as a tutor, you'll speak to students about this and they'll write down the definition word for word, okay? And again, what that leads to is that memorization, isn't it? That first mistake that we've just talked about, because they're trying to memorize. And what they really should do is switch that memorizing from actually understanding, from memorizing to actually understanding the content. So what I teach my students is to focus on the key points. So we'll talk about diffusion, right? And rather than me just maybe bringing up a slide and saying this is the definition, I then get them to write the key points. I get them to think about what's diffusion about. Well, it's a transport process. What is the direction of movement? What substances are involved? Gases, liquid, and then talk also about net movement. So by just doing 3 bullet points around some sort of key, focusing on the key points around something, then that's a trigger, right? So I don't know if you've been in a situation where even if you had to think about somebody's name, you know somebody and you've forgotten their name, but the smell of something or a color or something else about that person, right, just instantly actually makes you remember their name. It's like a trigger, right? It's how the brain works, right? There's something that kind of triggers an information and it helps you to remember everything, right? That is the best way to learn when you're making notes. You just want to trigger, right? So if you think about it, if you had an option where you had a prompt, just a little prompt, a little trigger that would help you remember everything, right? Because I don't know about you, but I know about me, when I can still think about many things when I was younger. I can literally think as far down to I was wearing that color clothes. And it's that little something that triggers the information. So if you had an option where you just had a little prompt that helps you to trigger everything that's happening, what they said, what they did, and so on and so forth, or you had to write down everything and store it in your head, and then potentially forget about 50% of that, which would you prefer? Especially taking into account that you're busy, you've got families, you've got so much to do. My guess is that you're just going to want that little trigger. You're not going to want to store everything in your brain because your brain can only store so much, right? And so, yeah, that's the key thing with regards to making notes. I teach my students to just make the key points, and it's not easy. It's something to do with comfort, and I did that for years, just excessively making notes. If I don't excessively make notes, I'm not going to remember, I'm not going to learn. And doing the key points is harder because it pushes you out of your comfort zone. It's that active learning, isn't it? It's that, one, I need to think about it. 2, I need to write it down. I'm not just passively copying it down. So it's harder, but it's a much, much better way to learn instead of just making notes. Okay, it's simple. It's as simple as that, but because students are so overwhelmed with their studies, with organization, they never really think about it at all. Okay, what is the third mistake that students make that kind of slows down their learning? It's not revisiting what they've learned. Again, another simple one, but for some reason, many students do. They go to school, they write down in the books, and that's it. And maybe just before the exams or tests or assessments, they try to revise, right? Now, let's think of a simple scenario, simple situation. Say I like to use like IT skills, for instance, for some reason. I don't know, say you had a new job and you need to learn, you needed to be like a Zoom guru or whatever. If you learned it, you're not going to know it the first time, right? But if you learned it or you learned certain thing about it and you forgot about it for 3 months and came back to it 3 months later, are you going to remember it? No. Simple as that. If you want to learn something, you need to go over it a few times to actually apply that information. And in all honesty, that's what many students do. They maybe make notes at school from whatever they learn at school. And maybe if they have extra sessions after school, but they don't go over it. They don't revisit their learning. And what they really should be doing is revisiting the learning and revisiting them frequently. A good thing is if they learn something today, go back over it in 2 to 3 days time, maybe 5 to 7 days time, then 2 weeks later. And what they'll find is each time that they actually go over it, they're learning more and more, and that information is now being embedded in a long-term memory, right? Because if you left it for a week or a month or 3 months or a year when you have your test, then you're going to need so much more energy to learn the same thing again. So it's really important to just go through it as frequently as you can. And this is where like a lot of organization and a lot of planning is involved, because they're not just doing this for science, they're doing this for all the other subjects as well. So this kind of learning is called actual space learning. It's well known, it's scientifically proven to work. There's some very good studies out there that shows that students who space their learning do incredibly better than students who don't, right? Just for that mere fact that it goes into the long-term memory. Yeah, so that's the third mistake that they make, and that's what I would recommend, that they actually revisit their learning and space it out. So I'm actually want to jump back into mistake number 1, which is memorizing, because I didn't talk about, okay, what can they do about it instead? Now, I'm going to share this BBC Bite-sized slide with you, because I think that would make more sense. Let's just find it. All right, so this is still sticking with, I've talked about diffusion earlier, might as well stick with the same thing. I've been teaching my students this recently, actually. And around that topic, there's a lot that students need to know. Excuse me. There's a lot that students need to know around adaptations of body systems in animals, in plants. If you have a look, adaptations of leaves, adaptations in the small intestine, adaptations in the lungs, the alveoli of the lungs, in fish gills as well. Yeah, in fish gills and more. There's just a lot, especially in biology, there's a lot of questions on understanding around adaptations. Now, what do you think many students do? I've literally just gone through about 5 different slides there on the BBC Bite-Size website. What do many students do? So what I've noticed is many students would go, okay, let's read about the fish, let's make notes on adaptations of fish. Okay, let's look at the lungs and the alveoli. Let's make notes on the lungs and alveoli. Let's learn it. And then learn it for each and every single one of those, which is a lot, right? But here's what we do. What I teach my students is I get them to identify commonalities, right? Because it's all the same things, adaptations, right? So there's commonalities between all of them, Okay, there's commonalities between, let me just stop sharing this. I don't think you need to see that. Because there's commonalities between all of them, right? Once we identify those commonalities, we'll come up with something that would help us remember it, whether it's a mnemonic, an acronym, something, right? What that means, and I can guarantee you with biology, every single question you have, every single paper, every single year, there's always going to be a question around that. When you have a question around that, your brain doesn't get stuck and start to think, oh, I don't know, I don't remember, I haven't learnt that, I've forgotten. They just automatically think about what we've created, that little mnemonic or acronym that we've created, and they can apply it to the question. All they need is from acronym or mnemonic, whatever, to expand on it in order to explain. That's it. So I've taught my students that every time we go through questions around adaptations, my students know how to use this simple process, right? And it's just a massive chunk of biology that you spend 30 seconds, if even that, knowing a little process that you can use and apply it for everything. It just makes revision so much easier. Yeah, so these are the kind of things that are so important to use now, especially with just the amount of learning that has been lost. And we want students to catch up. We want them to be at the top of their game by next year. So they're basically ahead by next year, and they're not been behind or feeling like there's a lot that they don't know. Yeah, so I just wanted to come in, guys, very quickly and talk about that.